And it's a real pleasure to be joined on The Bigger Picture now by Deepak Babani, the Chief Executive of Eros Group, one of the UAE's leading electronics retailers with annual revenues of around 2 billion dirhams. Deepak Babani, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me at the studio.
We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about tonight, as its name suggests. It's the bigger picture, lots of retail issues to discuss. But let's begin in the here and now. Dubai Shopping Festival, such an important time for retailers such as yourself. Loads of hype, including on radio stations like this. But tell us, how has the reality been this DSF? We're almost at a close now.
In fact, DSF has been in the 16th year now. And we have seen on a year-to-year there's been growth in business. And in fact, not only does it spur the local population in buying, because there are a lot of good offers in town, but also brings in a lot of tourists who are attracted to buy consumer electronic products. So we have seen this DSF also, we are looking at a 35 to 40% growth over the previous year.
35 to 40% growth over 2011.
Right. Basically, you have in Dubai 4 seasons where business really goes up. It's the Dubai Shopping Festival, the Summer Surprises, and then you have Ramadan and you have the JITEX. So these are the four times when the electronic business really takes a big spike in growth.
So talk to me about who's been doing the shopping. You talked about some locals, some tourists, and also the kind of stuff that they're spending their money on at the moment.
Basically, if you look in terms of products, there are 3 or 4 products which really attract a lot of business during DSF. It's the number one, the flat panels,
the TVs,
the TVs, the mobile phones, and recently more so because of the hype in the smartphone category. So there's a lot of sales of smartphones in this season. And then you have the notebook PCs, which is a third category, and lastly the digital still cameras, which is another category which has a big growth in the business.
That surprises me. I mean, I haven't used a camera for probably 2 or 3 years now, because the camera on my mobile phone is so good just for holiday snaps or taking pictures of my kids, or the stuff that most of us use cameras for. Of course, the specialist will buy a digital camera, but does it surprise you when and you're the representative for Samsung, so you know all about the kind of high-end handsets they're producing, and Apple and others. Does it surprise you that people are still buying digital cameras?
Yeah, because, for example, even, though I have a very nice 6 megapixel or 8 megapixel camera on my mobile phone, I still would like to have a camera where, I can do much more than, a normal mobile phone camera. So, like zooming in and out, and, normally a mobile phone does a digital zooming. But
I was interested in one, if you like, product segment that you didn't mention. You talked about all the hot sectors, TVs, mobile phones, and others. You didn't mention tablets there. We read so much about tablets, but again, is that too much hype?
Tablets is, again, when I met computers, I meant the tablets was a part of the computer category.
But in terms of, though, we talk about them so much, and Tim has one. I had one until last week when I left mine on an aeroplane, but that's another matter. But are people buying them in volume? You do 2 billion dirhams worth of revenue a year, so you're a mature
2.6 this year.
2.6 this year. And are tablets really moving a needle or making a dent in those figures, or are they just kind of, cherry on the icing?
Yes, tablets has been a very popular category. In fact, previously the category of netbooks, where people used it for very basic computing, are now buying tablet PCs. So, for example, a housewife in the house or the grandfather, grandmother in the house wants a tablet PC, because what they need to do is just, look at mails, scan the net. So for that, a tablet PC is very good. For business purposes, people use it for, kind of synchronizing it with their notebook PCs. But I can see a time where this will all consolidate and get into 1 or 2 kind of equipment.
And in terms of the winners in the smartphone and tablet wars, a couple seem to have emerged recently. One, of course, has been Apple. We know all about them. They almost invented the tablet space. But one of the others has been a company that you represent. You're a general retailer in many senses, but you also have some specific brands that you represent, and Samsung is one of those. And Samsung really has emerged through the Android platform as one of the major players, particularly in smartphones, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think especially in the Android platform, the scope is very, very large because of the number of applications that you have on the Google, which is over 500,000 at this moment. And quite a few of them are free. So in terms of accessibility, I think the Google platform is going to be very, very strong. And Samsung is all ready to give a tough fight to Apple. And it's not going to be very long before we will emerge as the number one leaders in the smartphone category as well.
So that's what people are buying. But who's doing the buying? You only have to open up a newspaper. It doesn't even have to be the Financial Times to realise that the world is in economic crisis still, and the Middle East is perhaps insulated to some extent, but certainly not immune. Who's coming in spending 2.6 billion dirhams at Eros?
I would agree with you that the world scenario is not really very conducive at this moment. But Dubai, in a sense, has been very lucky because it's we call Dubai as the eye of the storm. And when you have all this unrest all around the Middle East, a lot of inflow from these countries where there are unrest is coming into Dubai as a safer haven. So a lot of people who want to live with a lot of security from these regions are now settling down in Dubai, and therefore the business in Dubai has only been growing.
And these are mainly people based in Dubai. It's people like myself and Tim and yourself. Are they the main customers still?
On a day-to-day basis, yes. But, when you have these festivals, you also have a lot of tourists coming to Dubai. So I would say that tourists form about 25 to 30% of the shopping festival business. But otherwise, it's all domestic buying.
I was interested to read comments. I think it was from one of your colleagues, your deputy CEO, but it might have been one of the other retailers. And this surprised me, that still we have an awful lot of customers coming over from your native country, from India, buying electronics here and taking it back with them. I thought those days had gone because, you go to Delhi or Bombay and the malls are full of these things. But there are sometimes tax reasons that it still happens.
Exactly. There is a very, very large amount of inflow into India because in the baggage allowances, you're allowed to carry before a 32-inch and now a 40-inch LCD. Duty free.
As part of hand baggage.
So you save almost 30% 30 to 35% as compared to a local price. So anybody who comes on a holiday to Dubai, wants to carry a TV back home because it's much cheaper. So.
And that's heading east, which I guess is the trade route that we all know about. I'm particularly interested, though, because you're heading west, aren't you? Not into Europe or the United States, but into Africa. You've got an office and a base in Dar es Salaam now. Talk to me about that business.
Again, Africa is I believe is the future of the business because Africa has not really grown. Look at mobile phones. Even establishing a landline infrastructure in Africa is going to be a very, very difficult job. So mobile phones are booming into Africa and they're only going to grow. That's the only territory where growth is not taking place. For example, if you look at Europe or if you look at America, they're talking of negative growths or even growths of 1% or 2%. But look at India or look at Asia or look at Africa. We're talking of double-digit growths in these areas. So I'm very, very bullish on Africa. And that's why we wanted to put our footprint into Africa. And therefore, we have offices in Kenya and Dar es Salaam. And it's not going to be very long before we get into other parts of Central and West Africa as well.
Do we see the emerging middle class in Africa? We read so much about the emerging middle class in China, the emerging middle class in India. Are we seeing that trend also in Africa?
There is, but not comparatively a smaller portion. But it's not very long before people get more education and the international authorities putting in more money into education and healthcare. That these areas will surely emerge into the future as a lot of buying potential.
And what are the challenges of doing business in Africa? Not always the easiest place, is it?
Yeah, so, I always believe that the more difficult the place, the more easier to make money, and that's what Africa is. Since it's difficult to make, fewer people venture there, and all the people who venture there, there is a lot of scope to make some good money out there.
So do you work with local partners there? How do you negotiate the maize?
We have our own offices there, and we normally deal with the local dealership there and try to see that we promote our products. The entire marketing is done by us, but what we rely on them is selling the product for us.
We're talking with Deepak Babani. He's the Chief Executive of Eros Group, electronics retailer and to an extent wholesaler here in the UAE, branching out as we've just heard. More from him when we come back. Any comments or questions, of course, we'd love to hear from you. We're talking with Deepak Vibhani. He's the Chief Executive of Eros Group, electronics retailer here in the UAE, with annual turnover of 2.6 billion dirhams. Deepak, thanks for staying with us.
Thank you very much.
We were talking before the break about the Here and Now Dubai Shopping Festival, and it's been good to you. Sales up about 35-40%, which is staggering for a mature business like yours, but long may it last. Let's talk now a little bit more broadly about the retail industry, and I'm particularly keen to talk to you about your career, because it's a fascinating story. Graduated in India at Manipal Institute of Technology.
That's right.
Took a job in India, and then was it 1977 you saw a job interview for a job here in Dubai?
That's right. That's right.
And you joined Jumbo Electronics,
That's right.
which at the time was well, it still is a major retailer, but certainly was then. And you stayed there for what?
3 years.
3 or 4 years. And it was the leading electronics retailer of the time. You had a good job. And then you joined Eros Group, which had, 6 staff and not much else.
That's right.
So what was the thinking then, leaving a giant like Jumbo for this small startup company?
At that time, with the word used to be around, I used to be the sales manager for Sony, and the word used to be around, everybody can sell Sony.
Yes.
And I was looking for something which was more challenging. And that's when the offer for doing the distribution for Hitachi came in. And I took up the challenge, and I wanted to do something different and prove myself that I had some capability in sales and marketing. So that's how I got into Eros.
So 6 people, that was back in the early 80s. 1981, the Badri Group, an Emirati privately owned family company, and still today Eros Group is owned by them, and you're the chief executive. You weren't at the time, but you have been for some years now.
That's right.
So talk to us about growing a business like that, from 6 people up to 1,500 staff now, and getting on for $1 billion of turnover.
I would say the initial period was fairly difficult, because you're not only a sales manager, but you're everything. And there were times when there was urgent deliveries, so you become the truck driver. And there were times when the customer is not happy with something, and you need to intervene and go till the end and see that he's satisfied. There were credit issues with dealers which need to be addressed. So there were multiple issues. So, unless and until a person was not multifaceted. Again, I learned the multifaceted on the job itself. So that really helped me to grow the business, because I didn't hesitate to do anything, whether it was normal or abnormal. I never hesitated to do it.
You had the Hitachi brand at the time.
That's right.
That was the Japanese brand.
That's right.
And it's still close. You've still got the dealership, and it's still close to your heart.
That's right.
Perhaps Samsung now, the Korean brand, which you also represent, has eclipsed that in terms of the public perception and probably revenue as well. How different are the businesses? You're at Eros. We know the stores. We're walking around the mall. We see Eros, and everything's in there. I don't know which brands, but it's all the brands are in there. And yet you have separately this situation where you represent Samsung and TCL and Hitachi and 1 or 2 others. How do you manage those relationships? Because potentially there's conflict there, isn't it? On the one hand, you're representing Samsung. On the other hand, in your stores, you've got all their competitors that you're selling.
Basically, our stores carry an entire range of products that we represent. For example, if you go to one of our dealers, probably he will have 30% of the range or 40% of the range. So when we have our own showrooms, we showcase the entire lineup of products. And what we have tried to do is put a very fairly balance between the various businesses we have. For example, 25% of our business is our own retail, where we don't undercut prices. So we strictly stick to the retail prices that are normally assigned to the market. Number 2, we support our dealers, which is another 35-40% of the market. And there's another 25-30% market, which is export. So we keep a fairly good balance between all the 3.
We've had a few SMSs in. Here's one which is related to this issue of competition. There's a very strong competition in electronics retailing now. And Sam writes in, I went to buy a laptop recently, went to Sharaf DG, plugins, Carrefour, Eros, Jumbo, blah, blah, blah. And he said, in his eyes, it was the same price everywhere, the same deals everywhere, the same service, and the same warranty. How do you compete if that's the perception of customers?
Just to give you an example, our showrooms generally handle most of the average selling price in the showrooms almost 25 to 30% higher than dealerships. we generally do not focus on entry product because those are mass moving products. So where our showroom come into play is, for example, large size panels or expensive laptops, where a lot of customer requires a lot of explanation on the product, and normally, for example, if you go to a dealer, they do not have time. I understand.
Talk to me the difference between a dealer and a showroom. Just clarify that in my mind.
No, our own showrooms carry entire lineup of products that we represent. So, for example, if somebody wants to see entire lineup, it's much easier to see it in the showroom than to see at a dealer's place. For example, if he goes to a particular dealer, he might only find 35 to 40% of the product line.
So the showroom is, say, the Samsung showroom?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Samsung or, whatever the Eros showrooms we have. So if you have an entire lineup, this is one. Number two, the staff are trained in terms of product knowledge, and they are not in a hurry to sell. They want to dissipate more of knowledge to the customer rather than focus more on the selling part of the...
We've had a number of SMSs in, as you might expect, about service. It's always an emotional issue. There's 3 or 4 issues on the radio show we know we'll get response on: house prices, school fees, and customer service levels in Dubai. And they will always attract a lot of attention. And people inevitably complain. They never send in text messages saying, I was at such and such a shop and I got great service. They always write in when they've had bad service. But there is a perception, not for your stores, I'm talking more broadly about retailers in Dubai, that levels of service, level of training of staff, the caliber of staff being employed isn't quite as high as we'd like to see. Do you think some of those criticisms, broadly speaking, of the retail industry here are valid?
The retail industry here is a challenge because, you have people coming here, expats coming on a contractual period. So there's a continuous process of training which has to be conducted because some staff leave, new staff come back. But there is one thing at Eros that we always believed in, that we can't live in this business without service. And so much so that we have regular meetings on trying to find out what are the customer satisfaction levels that we have. Any complaint that came to us, we try to close it within hours, not even days. So, and a lot of doubt on issues is given to the customer. So, if there are certain differences between us and the customer, we always give the benefit of doubt to the customer. And we realize that over a period of time, we have been quite efficient at handling customer complaints.
Let's talk about some broader issues. Reading in the newspapers this weekend about a company called EmiratesAvenue.com and one or two others like it, online retailers here in the UAE. We all know it's been very, very slow to pick up. We are a nation of people who like to go to the shopping mall. But nascent signs that it might be picking up. What's your thought on online retailing?
Just to give you some of the statistics, probably you already know that the Middle East has been growing at a rate of 1,400% in terms of internet penetration as compared to the world, which is about 400%. In spite of that, the online shopping has been very slow. I mean, we have been tracking some of our dealers who have online websites. It's been fairly slow. One of the reasons that I would attribute is that malls are very accessible and people in Dubai generally like to have a shopping experience. But I'm sure that over a period of time, this is going to be resolved, and internet shopping is going to become quite a rage. But till such time that happens, I think still it's in a very infant state at the moment.
But of course, as a chief executive, you're always looking forward, you're looking ahead to the next trend, not on what's actually happening now. Is it something you're looking at? I mean, what you see all these statistics, I see a fraction of them. Euromonitor, the analysis company, they put Gulf in the Gulf online shopping at about $1 billion last year, and they're predicting it'll be $2 billion in 2016. So what are you preparing for in 2016 if that happens?
Basically, we are trying to build up a very, very strong, first of all, a very, very, very strong CRM base. And over and above the CRM base, we are looking at starting a web store, but we do not expect too much of returns from the web store in the initial period. But I'm sure that once it catches on, it's going to be big business.
Would you consider something like an acquisition of an online platform?
Quite possible. Quite possible.
Let's look at one or two other issues that I know are always close to retailers' hearts. And one of them is the next big thing, the next big craze. Always trying to spot it. Tablets have probably been it for a year or two now. But again, looking forward. What's next?
Number of, being in the electronic, I think there are a number of things that are coming in. For example, in the short term, you'll have the large size OLED screen that will be coming in. probably end of this year.
That's a large TV screen.
Large TV with the OLED screen, where the screen size is very thin and it's very light. More accent on the picture quality. That's going to be big. But if I have to talk something on a longer base, I would say ultra portable computing device, which would be your phone, which would be your mobile, which will be your computing device, which would be your credit card. I mean, all wrapped into one.
And a final question before we take a quick break. I read some of your comments recently on the recession. We have had a downturn for the past 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years now, perhaps. Crikey, has it been that long? And there have been tough times, but you've weathered quite a lot of downturns, though, haven't you? You've been with Eros for, 30 odd years now?
I've seen three, four downturns myself.
And you say, in some ways, you quite like them?
I think it gives you a lot of sense of challenge at that period of time, and once you get off it, gives you a lot of satisfaction that you've been able to get out of it, and more strongly than ever before. So, and mind you that each recession has been different from the other. So therefore, it's a challenge, but there's a lot of satisfaction at the end of the challenge.
How does the one we've just been through, or perhaps are still living through, how does it compare with the others?
Looking at the world scenario doesn't look that it's the picture is very rosy. But again, one has to be optimistic and not really be very pessimistic. Till things don't roll out, I think one has to be keeping your ears on the ground and just seeing what's happening and, change the course based on a day-to-day basis.
We're talking with Deepak Babani, Chief Executive of Eros Group. When we come back, the 7 questions that we ask to all our guests on The Bigger Picture. Deepak Babani is the Chief Executive of Eros Group, electronics retailer and wholesaler here in the UAE. Turnover of 2.6 billion dirhams earlier on. Deepak told us that this DSF business has been up 35 to 40%. Long may that last, most of us would say. Deepak, we get to the stage now that we get to with all of our guests here on The Bigger Picture, the 7 questions that we ask to all of them, and I'll begin with this one. Which business leader would you invite for dinner?
The one who comes to my mind is Richard Branson, and I would assign reasons, because of his multiple businesses that he has, ranging from mobiles to space to healthcare to airlines.
You must get to meet an awful lot of senior guys in your line of work, Samsung and Hitachi. If you're distributing them in the Gulf, you must be fairly high up the food chain there.
That's right.
What inspirational qualities do you look for in business leaders, generally speaking? You picked out Richard Branson there, but what is it you particularly admire in your fellow chief executives?
I think the fact that he handles so many different assignments. He's into politics, he's into business, he's into social work. You put everything together. He has, a very, very balanced kind of business, and that's what I admire.
Second question: what's your favourite business gadget?
My Samsung Galaxy S2 is my favorite gadget, of course.
Is that the tablet or the phone?
It's a phone, but it almost does everything that a tablet does on a smaller screen.
Talk to me about this issue. You mentioned this related issue about we're just going to have one screen, you think, at some stage, because we do have tablets and phones now, don't we? I bet you've got a tablet as well, haven't you?
That's right, yes.
Because the phone is just a little bit too small to really be a computer, and if we make our phones any bigger, they're not phones anymore.
That's right.
We've got to put them in a bag, not a pocket. Can we really get there? Folding screens and stuff?
I believe that we will get there one day. And the screen might be slightly bigger than our current phone size. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a multiple device that will take care of everything that one needs to take care of.
Much more low-tech question. What's the best business book you've read?
It's been long that I don't read too many books these days, but I do read a lot of magazines. But I can only say that I pick up most of my tips from the people I move and talk to, and my colleagues or my peers. I've not really read a book for a very long time.
What's the best advice you've been given?
The best advice that I've been given is that constantly grow the business, whether it's vertically or horizontally. Continue to grow it consistently.
What do you look for when hiring staff? And you hire a lot of staff in the retail industry.
I think the most important thing I look at is the attitude. The attitude has to be very positive, and they should be loyal and dedicated to whatever they do.
Is there a difference, just a follow-up question to that, is there a difference in your approach to hiring managerial staff as opposed to staff for the shop floor? Are there any subtle nuances?
Yes, of course. When we hire managers, we generally look whether they have the capability to strategically analyze, to build strategies together, to be able to motivate the staff. So those are the qualities that we look at when we hire managers. But we look at frontline staff, it's, how they behave, their dress sense, how they attend the customers, what's the product knowledge they have. Those are the aspects that we look at frontline staff.
Which business achievement gives you the most satisfaction?
Consistently achieving the vision and mission of the company is what gives me the maximum satisfaction.
And finally, which big idea will shape your industry, the retail industry, over the next 10 years? Or maybe you don't think you're in the retail industry, maybe you think you're in the technology industry. How would you define your industry?
I would say that we are both. We are into technology, but as well as into the retail space.
So, given that, what big idea will define it?
I would say two things. I already mentioned it, ultra-portable, compact computing devices, which are phones, as well as, multiple devices. The other thing that comes to my mind is cloud computing, which is going to be the big thing in the next decade. So you no longer will have client servers; they will all be in the cloud. So you'll have a Google or a Amazon servers in the cloud.
Deepak Babani, it's been great talking to you. You're a chief executive of a multi-billion dirham company, so I can't let you go without asking one last question. IPO, you're a private company, you're a chief executive, you've grown it from 6 people to getting on for $1 billion worth of $1 billion worth of turnover. Do you ever consider listing on the stock markets? It's something that mature companies sometimes look at.
No, that's the mandate that we leave it to the owners of the company, and at this moment the mandate is that they would like to leave it as an ownership. Of course, there are advantages to going as a public company, but also there are a lot of advantages to being a private ownership. The pressures are different. So I would say that wherever we are quite happy at the moment, and at this moment the mandate is that we remain a private company, and whatever resources we require are being fulfilled by the owners. So I don't see that in the near future that we will be getting into public.
And what are your strategic plans then for the next 2 or 3 years? We know that you're branching out into Africa. Where else can we expect to see you?
We want to get into our basic focus is Middle East and Africa, but what we'd like to get into is other areas of business. Currently we are into technology business, so we'd like to look at solar energy, LED lighting is another area that we like to look at.
Solar energy?
That's right.
Talk to me through that. That's not an obvious transition to my mind from retail.
Some of the changes that are taking place is that solar energy from silicon is going into more solid state, and once it gets into solid state, the cost is going to be substantially brought down. And looking at the world energy situation at this moment, conservation of energy is a very big thing, and power generation will be very, very big. And Middle East and Africa, you have a lot of sunshine, and this could be used for solar power.
So would this be you'd be supplying to, I don't know, government departments, or would it be a case of on a Friday afternoon when Tim and I are shopping, we buy a new TV, a new printer, and half a dozen solar panels that we walk out to our Jeep from Eros?
We are looking at more to communities. So for example, if there are, say, remote villages or remote towns, we are looking at powering those towns. So especially places like Africa, where still cable is very difficult to lay. Controlling through solar power is going to be much easier and cheaper than the current solutions that we have.
Well, Deepak Babani, you've been Eros Group now for what, 31 years it sounds like. You've got plenty more on your plate to keep you busy for another few years to come. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me at the studio.